Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're doing something a little different. We're looking at something you deal with all the time, maybe without really thinking about it, the price tag. But not just the number, the whole thinking behind it. We've got some really fascinating material here that digs into how businesses use psychology, not just straight economics when setting prices. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack how prices aren't just about costs and profit margins. They're actually, powerful psychological signals designed to shape how you perceive value, influence your decisions, and ultimately sort of nudge you towards buying something. We'll explore the science, the strategies, the impact, and some of the trickier ethical sides too.
Yeah, and this material is great because it really highlights that deep link between, the numbers on a product and how our minds actually work as consumers. We're going to uncover some, frankly, surprising ways that pricing taps into our decision-making, often way below our conscious radar. It's a real look at how price communicates.
So where do we even begin with this? I guess the fundamental idea that seems to jump out is that price is really about perception, isn't it? More than just the number itself.
Absolutely. That's the core insight, really. A price isn't just a fact. It's a communication tool. It signals things about quality, about scarcity. It can even trigger specific emotions. And psychological pricing is all about deliberately using those signals.
So it's not always about being the cheapest, but about making the price feel right to the customer, how it sort of lands.
Precisely. It's about the perceived value.
Yeah.
And these strategies work because, all of us often rely on mental shortcuts, heuristics, and emotional responses when we buy things, especially when there are lots of choices or things are complex. We're not always doing a perfect rational calculation every time. And what's interesting is a lot of these psychological tactics are pretty easy, pretty cost-effective for businesses to use. They kind of layer on top of other pricing methods.
Right. And it seems it's not just about making things look cheap. Some strategies mentioned actually use high prices intentionally, like prestige pricing, to signal value or quality. It really is about managing the meaning attached to that number.
Exactly. It's about crafting that perception. And, when you're deliberately shaping perception like that, especially tapping into subconscious stuff, it naturally raises questions about fairness, about influence. We'll definitely get into those implications later, but it's part of the whole picture.
Okay, so that makes sense. Price is perception. But why does it work so consistently? What is it about our brain that makes us react this way?
That's where cognitive biases come in. Research shows our brains use these mental shortcuts all the time to process information quickly and make decisions faster. They're efficient, mostly, but they can also lead us down predictable paths that aren't strictly rational. And those predictable paths are where pricing psychology finds its leverage points.
Cognitive biases, like little quirks in how we think.
You could put it that way, yeah. They help us navigate a complex world quickly, but they do open the door to influence. A really common one is the left digit effect. Basically, our brains tend to overweight the importance of the leftmost digit when we read a number.
The classic 99-cent effect.
Exactly that. $9.99 versus $10. Logically, it's just 1 cent. But our brain sees the 9 first and kind of anchors on the idea that it's in the $9 range, not the $10 range. It just feels significantly cheaper. That's the core of what they call charm pricing.
Makes sense.
Then you've got anchoring bias. We don't evaluate prices in a vacuum. We tend to rely really heavily on the first piece of price information we encounter as a sort of reference point and anchor.
Like seeing the original price crossed out.
Precisely. That high original price sets an anchor, making the lower sale price seem like a much better deal by comparison. Or, when you look at subscription plans, if they list the super expensive premium option first, it can make the middle option seem more reasonable relative to that high anchor.
Yeah, okay, the first number frames everything that follows.
It sets the stage. And another really interesting one is the decoy effect, sometimes called asymmetrical dominance. This is where things get a bit sneaky, perhaps. You introduce a third option that's deliberately designed to be less attractive than one of the others, specifically to push you towards a target choice.
Okay, that sounds like a bit of a mind game. How does that work exactly?
Well, it works by manipulating the comparison set you're looking at. Imagine you have 2 choices. Option A is basic and cheap. Option B is premium and expensive. Now you introduce a third option, decoy C. This one is almost as expensive as option B, but only marginally better than option A. Nobody's really supposed to choose C. It's just there to make option B look like a much better value proposition compared to C. Suddenly, B seems more appealing relative to A than it did before.
And this is where that famous economist example fits in, right? That illustrates it perfectly.
Absolutely, it's the classic case study. They offered 3 subscription options: online only for $59, print only for $125, and then print plus online together for $125.
And you look at that and just think, wait, why would anyone pick print only for $125 when you can get both for the same price?
Exactly. The print-only option was the decoy. Its whole job was to make the print plus online bundle at $125 look like an absolute steal, a no-brainer compared to the decoy.
And the results were pretty dramatic, weren't they?
They were. With those 3 options, 84% chose the print plus online bundle, 16% chose online only, and literally 0 chose the print-only decoy.
Wow.
But here's the kicker. When they removed the decoy, just offering online for $59 and print plus online for $125, the preferences flipped. More people actually chose the cheaper $59 online option. Adding that seemingly pointless decoy totally shifted people's perception of value and steered their choice.
That's incredible. Just managing the comparison changes everything.
It really does. Other biases play big roles too, like loss aversion. We feel the pain of losing something much more strongly than the pleasure of gaining something equivalent. Businesses use this all the time with limited time offer or only 3 left in stock. It taps into that fear of missing out, creating urgency.
Right, the FOMO effect.
Exactly. And then there's the price-quality heuristic. This is our tendency, especially when we don't have much other information, to assume that a higher price means higher quality. Prestige pricing relies heavily on this. Bundle pricing also taps into perceived value, offering several things together for less than they'd cost individually. Think fast food combos, software suites. It feels like you're getting more bang for your buck.
Makes sense.
And lastly, don't forget framing effects. How you present the price matters hugely. Is it buy one, get one free, or 50% off 2 items? Mathematically the same, but the BOGO often feels more generous. Even small things like removing dollar signs on a menu or using smaller font sizes for the price can subtly influence how much people spend.
It's kind of amazing how many subtle nudges there are, just in how numbers are shown. And it sounds like these strategies often work together, especially like you said, when we're rushed or overwhelmed with choice.
Yes, absolutely. Our reliance on these shortcuts definitely increases under cognitive load or when we're uncertain.
Okay, so we get the why these biases. Now, how do businesses put this into action? What are the main strategies we actually encounter?
Right, let's connect the principles to the practices. We've already touched on several. Charm pricing is the big one, ending prices in 9 or 99 or sometimes 95. It leverages that left digit effect we talked about, signaling deal or value.
Yeah.
Super common for everyday items, mass market goods. The data generally suggests it works. Some studies show noticeable sales lifts, maybe, 24% or sometimes even higher compared to rounded prices in certain contexts. But like we said, put a .99 ending on a luxury watch and it might just undermine the whole premium feel.
Yeah, signals the wrong thing.
Exactly. Related is odd-even pricing more broadly. Odd numbers generally signal a discount, a calculated price, maybe a sale price. Even numbers ending in .00, .50 tend to signal quality, straightforwardness, prestige. So luxury brands often prefer those clean, even numbers. It helps position the product. But again, odd can hurt perceived quality while even might put off bargain hunters. Price anchoring, we talked about this, showing that initial higher price was $100 to make the current price, now $75, look attractive. It's standard in sales promotions, tiered pricing. It guides your judgment of value. The key is the anchor has to seem credible. If the original price feels totally inflated, it just backfires.
Right.
Decoy pricing, like the economist example, creating that third strategically weak option, very common in subscription models, software tiers, anywhere you want to nudge people towards a preferred middle or high option by making the comparison favorable.
Seems quite calculated.
It can be. Then there's prestige pricing. This is intentionally setting a high price to signal exclusivity, luxury, top quality, think high fashion brands, luxury cars, high-end services. Here, the high price is part of the appeal, part of the brand story. It allows for huge margins, builds that premium image. The downside, obviously, is it limits your potential market size, and these prices are usually simple, round numbers.
No .99s there.
Definitely not. And bundle pricing, packaging multiple things together for a single, usually lower price than buying them separately, increases the average amount people spend, helps move different kinds of inventory, works great if the bundle actually offers things the customer values together.
So it sounds like the strategy choice really hinges on the brand identity and who they're selling to. A budget airline isn't going to use prestige pricing.
Exactly right. It has to be consistent. Consumers evaluate prices relatively, and that relative part is shaped by the brand, the context, the comparisons available, and the signals the price itself sends.
Okay, but let's talk brass tacks. Does this stuff actually work reliably? What's the real-world impact?
Well, the research generally points to, yes, it does have an effect. Charm pricing, the 0.99 ending, is probably the most studied. And yeah, analyses frequently show sales increases. Some studies mention figures around, say, 24% compared to round numbers. There was a famous MIT study suggesting a 35% increase for a particular item. Some retail claims go even higher in specific cases, though you always take those with a grain of salt. But just look around the fact that something like, 90% of retail prices end in a 5 or a 9, over 60% ending in 9, that tells you businesses believe it works.
The prevalence is pretty convincing evidence itself.
It is, and framing, too. Remember that study showing people spent 73% more on a bonus pack versus an equivalent discount? It's the presentation. Even coupons, they don't just drive sales. Some neurostudies suggest getting a coupon actually reduces stress levels and lights up pleasure centers. That feeling of getting a deal is physically real.
Wow, okay, that's wild. It's not just about saving money, it's the psychological reward. So $19.99 doesn't just seem cheaper, it gives you a little dopamine hit of feeling smart.
That seems to be part of it. It can drive impulse buys, and if the product experience lives up to it, maybe even build some loyalty because the customer feels savvy. But, and this is really important, the impact isn't automatic or universal. The sources stress this. Effectiveness varies hugely by product, market, audience. Context is everything. Those stats are interesting indicators, but they aren't magic numbers. What works for one thing might bomb for another. Success really needs careful strategy, brand alignment, and crucially, lots of testing.
Right, so for businesses, the potential upsides are clear. Maybe more sales, easier decisions for customers, getting attention, boosting perceived value, standing out, higher average spending, and it's often cheap to implement.
Those are the pros, yes.
But there must be downsides too, right?
Yeah.
Risks involved.
Absolutely. Relying too much on these tactics can make a business vulnerable. If customers feel manipulated, trust is gone, and that's incredibly hard to win back. Your reputation can take a serious hit. You might also accidentally train customers to only buy on sale, which can kill your margins. Results aren't always consistent. You might attract customers who are only loyal to the discount, not the brand. And sometimes tactics just don't translate well across different cultures or contexts. So the real tightrope walk for businesses is balancing those potential short-term wins against the long-term health of the brand and customer trust. If you get it wrong, you can really alienate people.
That tension really brings us to a critical point the sources raise. The whole ethical dimension, when you're deliberately using psychology, tapping into biases, where's the line between clever marketing and, well, manipulation?
Yeah, that's a huge question, and it's often a gray area. The material points to a few key concerns. One is outright deception or manipulation. This is where strategies are used specifically to mislead people into choices that maybe aren't best for them. Think artificial scarcity, those countdown timers that mysteriously reset, or low stock warnings that aren't true. That's using loss aversion to pressure people unfairly.
Right, creating false urgency.
Exactly. Then there's the issue of fairness. Things like dynamic pricing that surges wildly during an emergency, or maybe charging different people very different prices for the exact same thing based on their data profile. It might be legal, but it can feel fundamentally unfair. And transparency is another big one. Ethical pricing, the sources argue, needs to be clear about the total cost. Hidden fees that pop up at the end after you've been anchored to a low initial price, that feels deliberately deceptive.
Like sneaking things in.
Pretty much. A lot of it seems to come down to intent and impact. Is the goal to genuinely guide a customer towards a good value proposition by highlighting benefits? Or is it to exploit known weaknesses and trick them into spending more? When customers perceive manipulation, trust evaporates, and that's hugely damaging long term.
And this ties right into the J.C. Penney story, which is such a cautionary tale from the material.
It really is, yeah. Back around 2011, JCPenney had this new CEO who wanted to ditch their traditional model. They were famous for high initial prices, constant sales, coupons everywhere, lots of charm pricing. He tried to switch to this fair and square everyday low pricing, simple, predictable prices, no more constant sales frenzy.
And it completely backfired her.
Right. Massively. Sales absolutely tanked, like down 20%. And the reason wasn't just that the new prices were mathematically wrong. It was a total misunderstanding of their customers' psychology. Their shoppers weren't just buying items, they were hooked on the game of bargain hunting. Finding that deal, using that coupon that was part of the experience, the psychological reward. Fair and Square took all that away. It removed the feeling of winning.
So it wasn't just the price point, it was the whole process and the feeling associated with it.
Exactly. It showed you just can't separate pricing from your brand identity and the deep-seated expectations your customers have. JCPenney broke that psychological contract, and it cost them dearly. It's a stark lesson.
Wow. Okay, so looking forward now, the sources talk quite a bit about AI and its growing role in pricing. How is technology changing this whole landscape?
Well, AI is basically turbocharging these psychological principles. It allows for implementation at a scale and speed we haven't seen before. We're seeing much more sophisticated dynamic pricing. Algorithms can adjust prices constantly in real time based on huge amounts of data, demand signals, competitor moves, inventory levels, maybe even things like local events or the weather.
So prices could change minute by minute.
Potentially, yes. But maybe the bigger shift is towards highly personalized pricing. AI can analyze incredible amounts of data about you, your past purchases, browsing habits, demographics, maybe even predict your willingness to pay or how susceptible you might be to certain tactics. This opens the door to tailoring offers, bundles, even the price ending, 0.99 versus 0.00, specifically for individuals or very small groups. There's this idea emerging of personalized value finds the shopper, driven by AI insights.
Whoa, so moving beyond segmenting markets to potentially segmenting down to one person.
That's the potential, yeah. AI makes that level of granularity feasible. It can also constantly run tests, optimize strategies on the fly, monitor competitors automatically. However, and this is a big however, this power dramatically amplifies all those ethical concerns we just talked about. The potential for hyper-manipulation becomes very real. Questions about fairness. Is it okay to charge two people different prices based solely on their data profile? And transparency become even more critical when these decisions are being made by complex, often opaque
It's
algorithms.
the black box problem.
Exactly. Building and maintaining trust in an age of AI-driven pricing requires really strong ethical frameworks and avoiding practices that feel predatory or exploitative. And there's also the thought that if everyone's using AI to constantly monitor and react, pricing could become this incredibly complex, fast-paced game focused purely on psychological manipulation rather than fundamental value.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, it's clear that pricing is way more complex and powerful than just putting a number on something. It leverages our built-in biases, our emotions. Strategies like charm pricing, anchoring, decoys, prestige, bundles, they work because they deliberately shape how we perceive value.
Right. And the key principles for getting it right, whether you're running a business or just trying to be a savvy consumer, seem to boil down to what the sources highlight. First, really understand your customer, what motivates them, how price sensitive they are, what they expect. Second, align your pricing completely with your brand identity. Remember JCPenney. Third, test everything rigorously. Context matters enormously. Fourth, prioritize ethics, transparency, and fairness build trust. And fifth, keep monitoring and be ready to adapt, especially with technology like AI changing the game so fast.
So the goal isn't just making a sale, it's managing the customer's entire perception of the value exchange. And done well, done ethically, it sounds like it can actually build loyalty, make customers feel smart, feel like they got a fair deal, even while their choices were being subtly guided. Wow, that really was a deep dive. It's actually kind of mind-blowing to think about how much strategy goes into those prices we see every single day and how our own minds are reacting, often without us consciously clocking it.
It really does show that tiny details like that last digit or how you frame an offer can have a pretty significant ripple effect on our choices. Understanding this gives you a much clearer view of the marketplace for sure. And maybe here's a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. As AI makes pricing increasingly dynamic, increasingly personalized, potentially analyzing your data to influence your decisions in real time, how aware will you be consciously of the psychological forces shaping what you see and what you choose to buy? Something to maybe think about next time you see a price ending in 0.99.
Hope this deep dive was valuable for you and your sources.